Hello, hello. Welcome to day number 33 of the Bible in a Year. And I'm Father Mark, and going to speak about the strange and difficult stories that we find in Exodus chapters 10 and 11. And then there's Leviticus chapter 8. In Exodus, we're going through the plagues. And, you could say that God sent 10 plagues, but I like to say that God allowed, God maybe takes his protection away from those Egyptians who were mistreating his people. And so he allows these things to happen. It's also kind of a battle between the gods. And the Egyptians had a god named Sennacherib, who was the god of crops, who was in charge of pest control. So obviously Sennacherib didn't do a very good job of controlling. And so at the word of Moses, this cloud of locusts comes and darkens the sky and eats up all the food and everything, the green in the whole country. The ninth plague, you had the plague of darkness, and there's a Egyptian god of the sun who is one of the most famous, Re or Atum Re, and so obviously the God of Israel, Yahweh, is more powerful. 3 days of darkness, but only in the land where the Egyptians were, there was light where they were. So it was just very clear. But the Pharaoh kept being obstinate, and so God had to send that 10th plague, which is the really tough one to explain. Because if you think that God sent that 10th plague, it makes God look bad, of course, because this was the death of the firstborn, and it seems so terrible to think of that, but there's a few things we could say that kind of help us to understand it a little bit. Well, first, it was a kind of a battle against the gods or the demons of the Egyptians. The Pharaoh had a patron god, or like a patron saint, you could say, named Osiris, was the god of life. And so just imagine when Pharaoh's own son died, he obviously realized that his God is no match for the God of Israel. So that's one thing you could think of to kind of explain this. Another thing that you can think of to sort of get God off the hook is to think that maybe it wasn't really God who killed the firstborn babies of the Egyptians, that it was really an evil spirit. It speaks sometimes of an angel of death, God passing over, yes, but also this angel of death passing over. And so it could be, I think, this reality that the Egyptians for centuries had been serving these idols, these demons, these pagan gods, and the evil spirits, the demons, they're always looking for attention, and they make deals, and people, practice the occult, and they get secret powers and knowledge by doing witchcraft, and they kind of, even now, people sell their soul, and they get favors, and they offer their life or their soul, or they offer their own children. They consecrate. This kind of thing happens, and it happened back then, and so. A little later in the book of Leviticus that we're studying, in chapter 18, verse 21, there's a law. God says to the Israelites, "Do not give any of your children to be sacrificed to Molech." And so, yes, it was common practice in the ancient Near East, in some places, to sacrifice babies. We know the Aztecs used to do human sacrifice, and so demons they hate us. I like to say that the devil hates our guts because he doesn't have any, right? The evil spirits are fallen angels who are jealous of us, and they hate us, and they hate babies, and in fact satanic cults are involved in the helping to make abortion legal in some places, and that's just really typical. Satanism demands child sacrifice. It's really a horrible thing. So that could be now. So if you look at the chapter 11, the final plague, the 10th plague, verse 4, it says it does seem to say that the Lord is going out at midnight on that night of the Passover. It says, I will go forth. Thus says the Lord, I will go forth in the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn of the land of Egypt shall die. And then, in the next chapter, in chapter 12, verse number 23, it says, the Lord will pass through and slay the Egyptians. But then it says, but when he sees the blood on the lintel and on the two doorposts, the Lord will pass over the door and will not allow the destroyer to enter your houses to slay you. So it's like, Yahweh is overseeing this, and it's happening. God knows everything, and he's everywhere. But the angels are often mediators. The angels do things for God, and demons, God maybe allows demons to, but God is under complete control of everything. So that's why, I kind of think that sometimes in the scriptures, it's not clear whether something is, whether it's God or whether it's an angel, or whether it's God acting or speaking, or whether it's an angel. That's oftentimes in the ancient Hebrew, it's hard to discern that. And so I think it's the same here, where it says that God allows sometimes when it's the Egyptians, he allowed it, but when there was Israelite houses with the blood on the doorposts, that was a sign that he would prevent and make the destroyer pass over that house. Another thing that might help us to understand this terrible 10th plague of the death of the firstborns is to realize that, firstborns have, we've been seeing in the whole Bible study so far, in the book of Genesis especially, the fact that firstborns often get the bad, rap. They get the bad, they don't get a good shake, and they get the bad end of the deal. For example, all these examples, we've heard it over and over again, that the older son who should get the inheritance ends up, suffering or not getting what he should get, and the younger son gets a blessing. We've seen it again and again. For example, Abel, is favored over his older son Cain. God looks with favor on his sacrifice. He sacrificed a lamb from his flock, and then Cain got jealous. We had Isaac was favored over Ishmael, right? The two sons of Abraham. We had the two twin sons of Rebekah and Isaac in Rebekah's womb, Jacob and Esau, and they were fighting in the womb, and then Esau comes out, and Jacob is holding on to his heel. That's what Jacob means, grasping, or and it's kind of an image of us, Jesus Christ is the firstborn, and he ascends into heaven, and we hold on to his heel, and we, the firstborn of all creation, Christ suffers, but we get the inheritance. In any case, then there's the twin sons of Tamar, and that was Perez. The older son was Zerah, and that was the funny story where Zerah puts his arm out first, and they put the red scarlet thread on the hand to label the firstborn, but then that hand pulls back in, and then Perez is born first, and he's named Breach. Perez means breach. He kind of popped out, breech birth, and so he's sort of not the firstborn, but he gets to be the firstborn, and that's kind of interesting too. And the red scarlet could represent, the suffering blood of Christ, a firstborn who suffers. So that's a strange little story. Then we have the sons of Jacob. Joseph was one of the youngest, of course, but his older brothers, Reuben and Simeon and Levi, they all get sort of disqualified, and Joseph gets to be the leader of all, and so the younger one, And then the grandsons of Jacob, the two sons of Joseph, the older one was Manasseh, but when Jacob is dying, he goes to bless them, and he switches hands, and he puts his right hand on Ephraim, the younger one, Joseph tries to stop him, says, no, this is the old one. But he says, this is what I want to do. So all through, you've got this whole theme of the firstborn suffering. So what is with that? It's just a mysterious sort of thing all through the Bible. And then, of course, on top of that, you've got the fact that several times in the scriptures it says that Israel, the chosen race, is the firstborn of the Lord. And so the Lord, takes his people out of Egypt, and he says, you mistreat my firstborn, I'm going to mistreat your firstborns. And that is kind of a part of an explanation, perhaps, to these mysterious stories.